started. The first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here from the public? Not today. Okay. We'll just move right along then. So we attendance. Okay. Rom,
Present.
Bob,
Present.
Joe, Campbell,
I'm here.
Patrick,
I'm here.
Scott,
Here.
Michael,
Present.
Ajit,
Present.
Dan Sokol is here for Lauren Jorgensen.
Here.
Okay, great. Rose,
Here.
Jan,
Yep.
Eileen,
I think I am here for Eileen. Julie Beason.
okay. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Julie. Fred?
Yep.
Maura? Susan?
Susan's not here, but I'm Bhargavi. I'm in for her.
Awesome, thank you. And Brian. We do have a quorum. Okay. So moving along, so as a result of our last meeting, we put together a remediation plan for how to better improve the security incidents and better improve the security for P20 win. So the plan is to make a motion and have a discussion and vote to approve this plan so that we can begin making these changes. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, great. Is there, so to start the discussion, Scott's gonna share his screen and we're gonna go over the short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans that we are proposing.
Thanks, Katie. Sorry, let me pull this stuff up that I'm going to share and then share it. To bear with me for a second. So let me talk while I'm trying to click on this. Okay, here, tell me, you all see the slide?
Yes.
Great. So just to go over the overall sort of flow for this and what's on the table, this is covering sort of multiple items for the agenda today, but to situate this and as kind of a refresher for folks. So when the agencies signed on to the enterprise MOU a couple of years ago for P20 win, we put in place a set of processes for reporting security incidents up to data governing board, then to the executive board, so that there's a way that you all have transparency. If something happens, the nature of the incident, steps being taken to resolve it, and then we can go through a real process to ensure everybody sort of understands it, even if it doesn't directly impact your agency, and then we can make the necessary system improvements to address and prevent future occurrences of these. So we've had ideally, this would be something we would never have to use. Fortunately, we've had to use it a few times in the last year since we set up the incident reporting in 2022. And then there's a cycle when an incident happens. So if there's an incident, we document it, go through the details of it, report that to the data governing board, make sure the data governing board is fully informed and notified about it, have any discussion about ideas or recommendations from the board members to address that incident. So that's what we did in the last data governing board meeting, is went through the notification about the two incidents that occurred over the summer, and had some discussion about just to make sure everybody's fully apprised of the nature of those, we went through discussion then. We discussed it again sort of at some length in the data stewards meeting. So the data stewards understood this and have had a series of one-off discussions with individuals to kind of get ideas on the table. The next step, so first step is notification. Next step is sort of resolving it. So the next step is we put together a plan based on the discussions, the nature of the incidents, the recommendations from data governing board members and anyone else involved in the process, including the requesters, to put in place actions to, the language that's here is mitigate the actual or potential breach and prevent similar incidents from occurring in the future. And we want to do is make sure that we communicate any lessons learned on the root causes. So that's the document that you have in the board materials for today, is the plan to take steps to mitigate these incidents. We bundled the two from the summer together just because of the timing, and we wanted to take like a holistic approach to this where we're looking at sort of the forest, not just the individual trees in it, and we're looking over the course of the last year and really all the things that we've kind of had occur over that period of time. So the role for today is to, we put together a plan, and I thank many of you for the willingness to consult or provide some advice or, workshopping some of the ideas here in the last month or so. So we put together a plan, and our hope is that we can have any discussion, make any, revisions that are necessary to the plan in that discussion, but really come out of today with approval for the plan so that we can move to the next steps in the incident reporting process, which are sharing it with the executive board who meet in a week and a half. And that's sort of, again, on the steps for reporting and transparency, but also really to put in place those actions. So we have, again, had a series of incidents over the last year. As we've had more requests come in, we've had more complexity for the requests. There's more agencies involved, more files kind of moving, and we want to make sure that we are putting in place a process that your agencies and anybody else can be comfortable that your data is going to be kept secure. At the same time, I think we recognize we have to make some changes. If we continue to sort of use the same steps and the same process, we'll continue to get the same results and we'll have more reporting like this. So one of the documents you have in front of you is the remediation plan. I'm just going to go through the recommendations at a high level. You all, again, have the file, and hopefully you've had some opportunity to review and think through it. And again, we're happy to discuss any aspect of it. We put in place 3 sets of recommendations, short, medium, and long-term recommendations. Short-term recommendations are things that we think we can do now. So basically, essentially, like after this meeting, we can put these in place, or very soon, with no sort of existing resource. These are all things we can do within existing resources, with, sort of modest, achievable changes to the process. Medium-term recommendations are things that are a little bit longer term, not, years in the future, but it's going to take a little while to put some of these things together. It involves a little bit of resource requirements to do this, but they're sort of modest changes that we felt are very achievable in, sort of a medium term, I would think, in terms of like weeks or months, not days. And then long term, this is really like months to years change, is putting in place things that require resources, really require due diligence and thought. And because of the length of time it takes for that, those are things that we don't think we can put in place today, but we want to make sure that we can keep the process moving forward. And so we put together short, medium, and long-term recommendations so that we can do things today that make concrete improvements to the system, but have a roadmap where you're seeing other things that we are looking at or planning to do over the longer term. Sort of short-term steps, there's 3 components to it. The main one is really this, what we call disclosure review, that would address the incidents that we've seen in the last year. We're really reviewing the files before they go to the requester. We're reviewing exactly the same data that is sent to the requester to ensure that what you have agreed to provide to the data requester is exactly what's being sent to them. That's not a step that we have in the process now that would have caught, I think, the incidents that we had over the course of the last year. It has these secondary benefits, which are not insubstantial. I think that it also helps a little bit on the privacy and substantially in the data minimization front, which is a concern that some of the agencies have raised about the sort of existing process. So we think there's some ancillary benefits to adding this step to the process. And again, it can be done with really sort of no cost implications. We will have to do a little work amongst our OPM and DOL to coordinate this, but we've talked enough that I think we feel like that's achievable with the existing resources. Second step is providing more documentation about secure email. This is a tool that anyone in state service has available to them. I don't know that it would have prevented incidents, but it helps minimize the potential for some of these things occurring. There's no cost to doing this, and it's just an easy step that people could take. So we're going to put documentation together, communicate that to data requesters about and to agencies because they have to be involved in the use of it to make sure people are cognizant of when that's available. And then the third one is we're going to try and bring on it says a consultant, but sort of someone to advise on improvements to SFTP configuration to just make that a little easier to navigate. That I think does go hand in hand with this first step because there's that creates. It'll make that process a little bit easier if we can make some changes to SFTP configuration. So that is bringing on a consultant. Consultant will make recommendations. We'll bring the recommendations back to the data governing board before we do anything. But we just want you to know we're going to bring on some resources to take a dedicated look at that because that's been sort of a pain point in the process. Medium term, putting in place a process through which we require and can provide recommendations for security training for anyone that's accessing data, whether it's a data requester or staff from an agency. I know all state agency staff already go through this on a sort of regular basis, but this is an easy thing to put in place. It'll just take a little while to put together a set of resources for that. So I think that's a good common sense change to make to the process, bundling that and some of the other documentation, including for secure email in a handbook or guidelines. We'll put together language for this for data requesters that also just helps navigate, like, here's things you're going to do, here's things that you should not be doing, so that that's clear for third-party requesters and again, agency staff as well. That's, I think, some of the materials are there. They're just not packaged in a way that's easy to navigate. And then long-term, the third sort of set of recommendations is about putting in place a secure data enclave. It's a sort of term of art. I'm sure people can, maybe there's a better way to phrase this, but it's a way to make sure that we can control access to the data better than we can in the current configuration where we're sending sort of flat files out to third parties, to agencies. An enclave means that people come to the data rather than us sending the data to them. And so that is a way that we can manage the data that's released from P20 win data requests a little more closely. Many other states have done that. We just got word earlier in this week that Rhode Island, our neighbor across the border, is looking at putting this in place. And so it's something that definitely is being done in other jurisdictions. We can do in Connecticut, and we have some resources that'll facilitate that, but it just takes a longer time to put something in that in place. We can't flip a switch and get that set up tomorrow. So that's the three sets of recommendations: short, medium, long term. We package them all together again so that you're able to sort of take a holistic look at this, that it's the sort of forest, not just the individual trees. And hopefully all three of these types of recommendations make concrete improvements to the system and are sort of, again, hopefully, common sense changes that we can move forward with, and that will help us provide closure on this incident and keep the exchange of data through P20 win up and running. I think, Katie, unless I missed something I should note, that's the remediation plan recommendations. And I'll just, well, since I'm talking, the next item, should we move towards that? The next item would be, we took the steps in the short-term recommendations, put those into the data matching process document, the last version that you'd received. And so if we approve the remediation plan, we also have the process changes ready to go so that we, again, can, really essentially after this meeting, start putting these changes in place. So if we approve the remediation plan, then we'll move towards approving the revised matching process, which is the step-by-step kind of instructions for how this works.
That was everything.
And I can
Great.
keep this up or stop sharing. Just tell me your preferences.
Are there any comments or questions? Jan?
Thanks, Katie. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion as a group. It is really important, and the good documentation, nice and thorough, and to be able to bring all these ideas together for us to talk about. So appreciate that. And I just want to ask just a process question. Is now the time to actually discuss these recommendations, or are we going to move into a phase where we have an active discussion?
this is the time to have this discussion.
It's the time to have the discussion. Okay, so I think that there's a lot of promise in these ideas. And I appreciate all the time and effort that went into coming up with them in the first place. I do have some reservations in particular around the short-term disclosure review piece. I don't think that's a short-term item, and I don't think it enhances privacy to have all of the data moving to another agency. I don't know whether I'm curious to see if anybody else, I can go into detail, but before I do that, I'd like to see if anybody else has any specific comments on that point.
Well, Jan, I can add two things. So
UConn has the same concerns as you.
extent, sorry. So two things, it's not moving all the data to another agency. It's moving the data that's being sent to the requester to, in this case, OPM before it's sent to the requester, but it's not all the data. We wouldn't see the PII or the data that's used for matching. So it's not moving all the data to a new agency. It's taking the data that you're already agreeing to send to the requester and having us review it before it goes out. The privacy concern, hopefully some of it's documented there. But one of the things, and I know Susan's not in the meeting, but this had come up from discussion with DSS, is they don't have transparency into how their population sort of is represented in the final data set. And that's, I think, a concern that Susan raised in the review of some of the data requests, that they don't know sort of what they're releasing the data into. So, they know what their population the data that they have for that, but they don't know, what's going to happen when it's linked with some of the other data sets. And so this is a way in which we have transparency, can share that with the agencies about that before it goes out to a third party requester. Right now, what we're doing is releasing all of that data in isolation, but you don't have a sense of the overlap with other agencies. And so that's something I think they'd expressed some interest in previously. And so it has some benefits for that, in that you'd be able to, assess the population from your agency and how, that essentially overlaps with other agencies through what you're agreeing to release before the release of it. But again, that's in the status quo. There's no step for that. You can't review that.
Right. So essentially what we're doing is we're sending all of the data that a data requester would be getting, not just to the data requester after it's approved and everything, but also to OPM. So it's not the matching file, but depending on your definition of PII, and CSCU has a different definition of PII than is articulated by Scott in this. For us, a file, even if the names aren't on it, even if the matching fields aren't on it, the files that we send are considered personally identifiable information. Under FOIA, it's data that is linked or could be linked and has, information to identify individuals. Since it's individual level data with a lot of context, it is considered PII. So for us, for the recommendation here is to send all of the analytic data and the key to OPM so they can look at it, verify it, remove fields, really manipulate it. And so that role is something that would need to be documented in the DSA with responsibilities for security and liability and exactly what they can and can't do with the information. So I don't see that as a short-term fix. I think that would actually probably take a while to get that into the documents if people even agreed to that process. I'd like to just throw out some alternatives. When I first saw this, I thought, well, okay, one of the things we do internally at CSCU, Mike, Sarah, and myself, when we're processing data, is that we review each other's information. So if I have to send data out, she'll look at it and be like, is it all properly configured? If she sends something out, I'll look at it. Is it properly configured? So that internal check is very helpful. And one could potentially do a virtual check without actually moving the data, have a call with OPM where you've got the data files sort of queued up in your computer, you've redacted the names, any key matching fields if they are, whatever you want to redact, you could just white out the text and look at it virtually without actually moving it. That's one option. Another option might be to make this kind of review optional for the agencies that want to have their data reviewed in this way. CSCU is not an agency that's going to buy into this process. Let's see, another option, some other options here. The internal checking, like if agencies themselves, and I do understand, there's human error, right? We all have human error, but there's also, like, if we move all of the analytic data and the key to OPM, that's still a manual process. There's still people involved. That's another movement to them. And then from them to the end to the recipient. To me, that doesn't remove risk of movement. It adds a layer of complexity. To the point of removing fields, I really like the idea. I think Julie came up with I was raising this concern before about, if we don't have to send all sort of like the null matches, that we could remove them from the analytic file. That's something that could be done by the agencies if, when DOL conducts the match, they have a list of all of because they have the fake IDs, right? They have the fake IDs and the real IDs. They could simply, after the matching set, identify those, assuming it's needed for this particular request, because sometimes you do need the nulls. But if you want to remove them, they could identify all of the fake IDs that didn't match to anything, send them back to the receiving agency, and they can just simply call them internally, because it's the agency that owns the data, it's the agency that's responsible for that data. They can call them internally, and that doesn't have to be done by another agency, by OPM. So I raise a number of points here. I hope people understand what I'm saying, and also some alternatives I think we can talk about on this particular point. Comments?
Patrick and then Brian.
Yes, good morning. Just one point on what Jan talked about in terms of internal review. I don't want anyone to have the misimpression that there isn't internal review at DOL. Unfortunately, there was still human error as part of that process. So, and I mean, and we take responsibility for that. But we do have internal review, and unfortunately, in one of the incidents at question here, it didn't work because there was human error on the part of the reviewer, in addition to and that's, it was unfortunate, and we certainly do not want it to happen again. And so, but there is internal review at DOL, just as there is at CSCU, and unfortunately, it was just not 100% effective in this particular situation.
Brian?
Yep. So I think, Jan, I definitely agree that kind of the disclosure review or the redisclosure could certainly, pose a risk of more, just more human error. But I do think that it does add a good layer of, additional review. And I do like the idea of it being optional and or virtual. I think that, we at Judicial would probably, appreciate, an extra layer of review. I don't think that hurts, but I do agree that, based on agencies' definitions of, PII and other things, that could be an issue. I think for us, the concerns, there are some concerns that I would have and the branch would have around the secure data enclave, kind of the hosting of branch information on a system not controlled by the branch is typically not something that we're looking to to engage in. So again, these are good concepts. I think that we need to maintain their sort of optional nature. I don't know that every agency will be willing or able to participate in every one of these, but I think as a set of recommendations, they're pretty strong.
Thanks. Good morning. Yeah, I sort of agree with Brian too. I think from the SDE perspective, I think it would be good. And my thinking is that the request typically starts with OPM, and OPM engages with the requester to clarify the need and then craft and go back to all of us and establish the data request in the first place. And it seems to make sense to me that they be the sort of last stop, separate from each of us. I mean, we conduct our own internal code review, double review, so on. I almost think it would be helpful to have OPM sort of take a look and, hey, does this meet the requester's final sort of need as well? So from that standpoint as well, I think we'd be supportive of this. In terms of the long-term data enclave, I think that is really intriguing. We do spend a lot of time moving data and pulling data. Would love to think of a more streamlined approach. And there are more folks thinking about secure data enclaves. And I believe UConn actually has something that we leverage for one of our sort of separate research efforts that includes partnership with other IHEs. Instead of moving data all over the place, a data enclave that includes both where the data never leave that enclave, because the enclave includes the analytic tools to go along with the data that of choice. So people can use SAS, R, Stata, whatever tool they want. The data never leaves that enclave. So that's kind of intriguing to me as well. And I'm sorry, I do have to jump off for a call, but just want to throw my 2 cents in.
Thanks, Ajit. Have a good weekend. Scott?
Thanks. And I stopped sharing. I can put it back up because I can't figure out how to raise my hand with sharing on. Let's see, and I guess we lost Ajit, so I don't know whether we'll put things to a vote or not. Just on a couple of the things that have been raised up here. First, making it optional seems like a sort of reasonable concession if that'll allow us to approve it, because I think that would be, again, what we want is something where we can keep things moving forward. If we do not make changes to the process, we will continue to see incidents. And so I think if making it optional is sort of a reasonable step, that I don't personally have any concern about that. I'm sure we could reword the documents for that. A couple of things here. Jana brought up the data sharing agreements, definitely, and that's in the plan. That we'll need to add language to that. Our council's been through and is comfortable with that. So if we move this forward, we'll circulate the language that we need to go into those agreements. That's definitely the case. The enclave, again, this is still in the planning phase. That's why we put it there as a long term. But I think that's something that we want to plan with the agencies to make sure that it meets folks' needs. A couple of things have been brought up here. That's also something in other jurisdictions where they've put these kinds of things in place. They're also optional, so it's encouraged. We would rather you use this because we can manage and control access to the data better than if we send it out to you, the third party. But people can, do different things. And, UConn is a good example. We could send it to UConn and they keep it in their own secure enclave, and people are comfortable with that. So in other places, it's optional. As well. That's sort of standard operating procedure. Will we be at least, in the initial sort of discussions about planning for this, it would be really just the data that's released to the requesters. I think, Brian, to your point, it's not hosting like judicial branch or DCF or any other agency's data. In the long term, it's the same data that if you approve the request, you would already be sending out to some third party to essentially be hosting in their platform. So it's just taking the same thing that you would already be agreeing to release and having it so that it's in a, state managed platform rather than the third party. So that hopefully is kind of an improvement to the status quo. There's good opportunities to sort of reduce the overall movement of data like Ajit had brought up. But again, that's early sort of planning phases. I would put this in the, 6 months to a year bucket before anything kind of concrete can happen on that front. Although we're testing, we're trying to pilot and test out some different things to learn about that and how other things are configured, give people transparency into that. But that's sort of for the long term. The human review aspect of it, I think like a couple people have said, our assumption is agencies do this on their own. I know, for ourselves at OPM, we also have the same types of thing in place where, if we are working with data, we'll have multiple people look at it. I assume everybody does that. What we've seen, in sort of real life use of data in the last year or so is that is often, not sufficient. And so putting additional checks in the process to ensure that human error cannot be removed, but the potential for it to impact this process is minimized. So it's definitely, I hope everybody has processes like this in place, and our assumption is that's the case, but it has not been sufficient in the last year. That's why we are continuing to bring these types of incidents to the board. And again, looking at it holistically, it's not just these 3 incidents. We've had other times when we've had to work with a requester to make sure that they're getting the data that they had asked for in the request. We went through the dry run and surfaced a number of issues there as well. I think those are sort of like good simulations of reality. So I think we have a lot of track record to speak to for that. Again, I hope that people are doing that, but it does not prove to be sufficient for this. The virtual review is something we considered. It's exposing essentially the same data, possibly more, to the same parties. So to me, it's not a huge difference from what's being proposed here. The other thing it would not really allow us is what I think is not in the slide, but it's in the document, some of the things for data minimization, and then some of the things for data quality, which have also come up, which again, I think where, there are processes in place at agencies for human review of these, but it's just has not managed to catch all the instances where something that is not what is supposed to be released is getting released. So we talked about the virtual review, but I don't think it would really give the benefits for data quality or the data minimization. It is, I think we had discussed also the option, Jan, that you'd floated about sending the crosswalk files back to the agencies to remove the unmatched records if that's necessary for the request. That would expose other agencies' data in a way that is not currently exposed, even if it's exposing the fact that somebody is enrolled in another program. So we'd use the example of like if you're matching education data and DEMIS data, if somebody's, there's 5 students in a substance use program and you send back, can you remove, everybody except these 5 records, the agency then knows that they're, enrolled in the other program that's part of that data request. You could do it in a way that, keep the key files, but then it's still really sending it back to the agency that has access to the administrative data. It's increasing the movement of data and the number of files that are being transmitted, and still doesn't give us the check at the end of the process that what's being requested is exactly what's being released. So I think we're happy to kind of discuss alternatives to the scenarios, but I think most of the ones that have been floated are ones that we've gone through some sort of internal vetting and discussion with. And again, we're putting a proposal forward and it's not perfect. I don't think any of us thinks like this is the best solution to it, but it's something we can do with the resources that would address, not just these incidents, but a host of other challenges that we've kind of faced in the last year. And it is not done once, if we are able to approve the plan in the process, it's not done at that point. We can continue to make system improvements. And if we go through it, if we approve this plan today, we'll go through, do another dry run with the data. And if we go through and it's like, oh, this doesn't work either, this is no better, then like we'll go back and come up with another plan. So like this is not the end of this process, but we do want to be able to keep things moving forward. And I'm concerned that if we can't make changes today, that we won't be able to provide security for the agencies and ourselves. And I would say like OPM does not move the data, but we take on sort of substantial risk ourselves as the administrator for this. And so I think we are ourselves concerned that if we don't make changes to improve security, we will also be exposed just as you and your populations you serve are. So I might have missed something from the exchanges, and we welcome the discussion, and that's why we're sort of sharing the planning documents with you, having discussions in these meetings beforehand, so you have transparency about it. So Janie, you have your hand up.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. I agree. Changes are necessary, and a number of your suggestions are really great. It's this particular one that I think needs work for CSCU. I just wanted to comment on the data minimization piece, the removing of information. If the intent from an agency is to minimize what gets sent out, it's not in addition to have it sent to OPM and OPM sends back what the list. It's like the initial exposure should only be within the agency if they want to minimize what gets sent out. So granted, there might be a factor of, okay, well, these people didn't match to other agencies, but again, that knowledge would be stuck it would be with the source agency, and they could reduce using fake IDs. They could be using their analytic file, it's just it's a fake ID. So they wouldn't be sent the entire crosswalk back. They'd just be sent the list of their fake IDs that didn't happen to match. And that is a piece of knowledge. I do acknowledge that, but it's knowledge that stays with the agency that's sourcing the information. They can take those fake IDs and just delete those records from the data set when it's necessary. So I have a different perspective on that. I appreciate the opportunity to share those comments.
Katie, can I suggest that if we make some amendment to without wordsmithing the 4-page long document in front of the group, we make an amendment to the language that indicates that disclosure review is optional. Could we put it to a vote to approve the remediation plan? Because again, in this whole process, what we have is we notify the board, go through discussion, get ideas, present a plan to the board, and there's certainly room for improvement, but this is not the last discussion. I think again, we want to make sure we are taking steps to make improvements to the process. And again, if we take no steps to make improvements to the process, I will say that I'm concerned from the OPM side about the ability to kind of continue moving things in the way that we've been doing over the last year. So if we make amendments to the plan document to indicate that disclosure review is optional, subject to agency wish to do so, then what do we need to do to?
So moved as
Okay.
amended.
There we are. That guy. Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, so it's moved by Rom, seconded by Fred, to move forward with the language amended that disclosure review is optional. We'll do a voice vote unless there are any nays. So all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
I'm going to say nay because I need to see the written document before I can approve it. Sorry.
Yeah, you caused
I'm
an
gonna be a nay also.
Okay, so motion fails to amend the document.
Could we have a special meeting, either later this afternoon or maybe Monday, in order to be able to have the written documentation and we can vote on it in order to expedite the process?
I think from the OPM side, we could do that. We could set the meeting up, make the changes to the document, meet.
Need a little time to review it. Monday might be a little early, but I'm happy to expedite and have another meeting. Personally.
I'm open to Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday works for me.
Tuesday's better.
Okay, we will work on setting up a special meeting for Tuesday to review and vote on the remediation plan. Okay. Well, the next item on the agenda was to approve the matching process that was updated to reflect the disclosure review language. But seeing that we are going to have a special meeting on this, I suppose we should skip that item for now.
Katie, could we, and if there's a step we need to take in the Roberts rules, let me know, but can we still have the discussion on that? Because if we're making the changes to the plan document, which I think are relatively modest, it's just sort of taking that step and indicating that it's optional. And then we would also, if we approve the plan, we would want to approve the process again, so that we have a process in place. Currently, we do not have an approved process. That's a concern for OPM, and I think several of the agencies. And we would make, again, the same, parallel changes to the process document. So if there are comments from folks' review of that in the last week, it would be helpful to get that now so that we can make other changes before special meeting. Do we need to move to discuss it? Sorry.
No, we don't need to move to discuss it since we're not going to vote to approve it. So we can just discuss it. I can share my screen and go through the different steps.
Or just I'll talk through it, and it's up to folks if they want to share the screen. But we took what's in the plan, put it in steps. I think it's 15 through 18 in that document. Given that this has gone through many rounds of edits over the last year, we just took the track changes out of it so that it's a readable document and kind of take a clean read of it. But these are the step-by-step procedures that we need to have in place. We are following what I would say is like the draft version of this now. But we would be more, from OPM's side, we would be much more comfortable if there was an approved version of this. So we took what's in the plan and tried to capture it in 15 through 18. Here, I think the changes to it would be to say that these steps are optional, basically. But unless I'm missing something. But if there's other concerns or questions, and I don't think, Katie, we've received any from data governing board members, but that would be helpful to get on the table in this setting.
Thanks for sending the revised version. I do have some comments. I'd be happy to send them through email instead of articulating them here. That might make the most sense. I will just say that there were some steps that were in the prior version that were left off of this version due to the addition of the disclosure piece, like the last steps 15, 16, and 17 aren't in the new version, so they probably need to be added back in. At some point, somewhere in the documentation, it might be a good idea to clarify what the process is with sharing with DMV. I know that's kind of internal to DOL, but just so there's like, how is that matching handled, or agency's data sent anywhere else for that particular process, just to have that kind of clarified somewhere. Anyway, I will, I'll put my comments in an email and send them back. Thanks.
Helpful. And Patrick, you can correct me. No data sent to DMV. DMV sends data to DOL.
That is correct. But it is also correct that probably should be documented. So we're happy to document it.
Any other comments or questions? Now is just as good a time. Okay. Moving on. So the next item is data requests. So we're wrapping up a few data requests. The BCG request on disengaged and disconnected youth, we have a draft report that has been sent to the participating agencies. So we're making really great progress on this, and they will be presenting some of their findings at the executive board meeting on the 19th. So it's pretty big deal. And we're really excited to have gotten this far in the process. The post-secondary outcomes request, number 50, that's the peer fellow at the Department of Education. They're also wrapping up their analysis as well, so they'll be giving us a presentation soon. And then we have a couple of requests in the pipeline, though they are not quite ready for prime time. They are being reviewed internally and at the participating agencies. So not a whole lot happening right now. And again, being able to address and improve our security is really an important piece of this data request process too. So that is something to keep in mind. I don't know if there are any data requests anybody is aware of or wants to share. Okay, so then general updates. I'm going to turn it over to Ashley for the data matching work group.
Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone. Data matching work group. We've been meeting on a monthly basis. Up to this point, we have done a good review as to some softwares that are out there that are being used by similar systems to us, or similarly structured systems to us. In our last meeting, we reviewed, in our first meeting, we made a wants and needs list for data matching software. So after seeing a bunch of different options that are being employed again by similarly structured systems, we kind of reviewed those things and refined them to see what is our final list of wants and needs. And now we can move forward in the process of actually looking to obtain a software that will match that and also fit well into our system and potential future changes to our system. I'm happy to talk more either here or offline for anyone who is interested.
Are there any comments or questions about data matching? Scott.
I put Fred on the spot to talk because I think you had raised that DCF has some things that you're interested in, and I know is Julie still here? Did we lose? But we've had
Yes,
a couple
I'm
of
here.
agencies. Thank you. This might have come from, I don't know if this came from you or Eileen, but we had a couple of agencies say like, okay, we need something for our own purposes for matching, whether it's matching your own internal data, you know, one data set to another, or for something. And Fred, you can talk about what DCF needs. But I think that's also, we want to make sure that if we put something in place for this effort that has many agencies covered through it, that it's also something that people could employ. Either, you know, you could create your own local instance of it, or you could use the methods or something like that, that there's some way in which it would provide benefit to individual agencies. So I don't know if Fred or Julie want to talk about some of the things that are from the agency side. We also want to make sure that this process works and benefits the agencies. And so if we're putting something in place for matching that we use for this, it would help others as well.
Yeah, I think it would help. I wasn't part of the conversation from OEC for this piece, but I think if we have the right IT people or whomever, data goobers at the table, that, you know, one or two from the agency, if they know how to use the tool, yeah, it would make things probably much more efficient. And then, you know, for us having a more coordinated, we just have so many different divisions. We're all doing our own thing still. So if we have the more coordinated side on the agency side, we just have such a small IT data team for agency wide, but I think it's a cool idea.
Yeah, and for us, we're in the midst of building a new comprehensive child welfare information system. Some of the requirements for that the feds have are to integrate with a smallish number of other agency data sets, but they encourage integrations across as many data sets that states find useful. So we have a list of about 80 different data sets we would love to establish agreements with to do data integrations to help our workers reduce the amount of double data entry they have, increase situational awareness across how people are being served by state agencies that DCF serves. And doing that work of integrations would, you know, greatly depends on good matching of person records across all those data sets. I was asking Scott recently if he knew whether there was anything going on at the state level to do person matching across state agency data sets, because it strikes us that this is not a unique issue to DCF. And it would be a lot more cost effective and efficient if there was a statewide solution that we were all using. But because we've started looking at these solutions and some of them are quite pricey. Informatica being a great example of a really, really awesome, amazingly capable system that is ridiculously expensive. So, so yeah, that's one of the main things for us. Go ahead, Julie.
Fred, for us with DCF, with impact being OEC and Access Health and DSS. So we have data matching inside for person to person inside there, the the EMPI. But then for us, we're connecting to DCF now for the foster care kids into Care for Kids. So those that weren't already in Care for Kids are now going to be part of our protective services. So we're going to have a higher need to do that data matching between systems.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, the demand for this type of work is only going to increase as time goes on. So we're really hoping not to have to do it alone. And of course, having that kind of application here too, when we're talking about trying to improve P20 Win data matching capabilities and improving security and efficiency and reducing cost. It's all kind of the same conversation.
Okay, great. Scott, are there any other general updates?
I don't think so. I can't remember.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I don't remember that there's anything else that we've had general updates, although anyone else in this meeting is welcome to apprise. Well, Janice in the chat about data ladder. Patrick, or maybe you could speak to this, your machine is on. But I think we don't know if it's going out of business, and out of an abundance of caution, we're willing to looking at it. The other thing I'll say, and
Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty clear that Data Ladder is not going out of business. What Data Ladder may be doing is ending its support for customers like us. So that's, which is not the same thing as going out of business. So, but it is unclear what we will be offered, if anything, that meets our needs at the end of our license. There does seem to be some, as Fred mentioned about things being pricey, if we buy the full shebang for some, much more money than we're paying now, I'm sure they would be happy to have us as a customer, but it doesn't seem that they're, at least some within that organization are not interested in supporting customers like us at the type of price point where we have been comfortable for the past many years with them. So we shall see. And that's why having a backup plan is essential in case they pull the plug on us or send us a bill that we can't pay. While I have the floor, I will just say that I met Bob for the first time in person yesterday. I saw Ajit and Ram and our former stalwart, and I know that's kind of an oxymoron, the former stalwart Rachel. And I've made this pitch before, but I do think that there is a value to in-person meetings, and it was great to see you, all those of you who were there. I used to see Fred frequently, and I haven't seen him in person in years, which is embarrassing because we live in the same town. So uh, just as an idea that it might be fun to try to have an in-person meeting at some point to discuss all these things in person.
Yeah, I found out Patrick had legs.
I do.
Yeah.
Didn't stop at the camera.
It's a great idea, Patrick. We'll figure it out. All right. Well, there's nothing else. I need a motion to adjourn, I believe.
So moved.
Yeah. Second.
Excellent. I don't think we actually need to vote on this. Oh, we do? Okay. Well, all in favor to adjourn, say aye.
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 in favor.
Okay. Have a great day.
Have a great weekend,
Thanks.
everybody.
Happy Friday. Bye-bye.
All right.
See ya.
Bye.